Hey, this is Heather from the Renaissance English History Podcast, and this is your Tudor Minute, your weekly dose of all things related to medieval and Renaissance England. So, today I'm going to talk to you about the Treaty of Universal Peace, which was, I'm trying to see what that is. Oh, it's a water bottle. It's like, what is that shining? It's a water bottle. All right. The Treaty of Universal Peace was actually a predecessor to the Field of Cloth of Gold. The Field of Cloth of Gold is, I just released an episode on that. It was an interview with a professor who is an expert on the field and on relations between Henry and Francis of France. And so I released this episode, and one of the things that he talked about in there was the Treaty of Universal Peace, and I think it's worth talking about because it's a piece of mastery that Wolsey pulled off that, if it would have lasted, would have been amazing. There's a lot of ifs there, but basically it was Henry realized that Henry, in the early part of his reign, wanted to be a great king and make war, and he failed early on with that in a war he was making with France, with the emperor, and he wasn't having some early success. And so Wolsey decided that what they should do instead of being great war people, if they couldn't do that, they could be great at making peace. And so they had this Treaty of Universal Peace, which all the countries in Europe, all the major countries, subscribed to. And it was basically saying that it was a mutual self-defense pact. So a very early form of a League of Nations, 400 years early. And it was basically all the countries saying that they would protect each other against any kind of aggression. And then if anybody was attacked, they would attack back. But if anybody had, this is the part I love, if anybody had an issue with anybody else, they would take it to Henry. So Henry would be the arbiter of all of the issues that anybody might have with anybody else in Europe. And the Pope agreed to this. Like, you would think that it should have been the Pope who was the arbiter, but they agreed to this. And when I asked Glenn Richardson about that in the episode, he said, well, it was kind of this double game that Wolsey was playing. He snuck that in at the very end. But I think it's really cool that for a while, for a year or so, Henry was the official arbiter of all of the wars and the issues that people had in Europe. And one of the things in that treaty as well said that Henry and Francis were going to meet each other, and so kind of out of that came the Field of Cloth of Gold. But I think it's just a super funny thing to think about that this piece was put in. The Treaty of Universal Peace that had this part of it that said that Henry was going to be the arbiter of any kind of issues that anybody in Europe had with anybody else. And people agreed to that. It's quite amusing. So Treaty of Universal Peace, and then if you want to hear more, you can check out the episode on the Field of Cloth of Gold as well. So that has been your Tudor Minute. To learn more about the Renaissance English History Podcast, you can go to www.englandcast.com or facebook.com/englandcast. Thanks so much. I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye.